Welcome to Deerhound Productions. I'm DanCat33, and today I'll be reviewing Five Nights at Freddy's 2, the newest film entry for the Funny Bear Robot series. Much like the first movie, critics and fans have had some very differing opinions on this film, with good points on both sides. This movie was very enjoyable as a longtime fan of the series, but also some very glaring flaws, so let's dive into both of those aspects. First off, I wanted to acknowledge how this film builds off criticism from the previous entry. This reminds me a lot of Ruin. There is definitely increased focus on horror after the previous installment received criticism on that front. This movie was absolutely much scarier. Granted, most of those were just sudden jump scares, but it's FNAF, it's fine. The film also had some more action, and big spoilers ahead, so go play Secret of the Mimic or My Pop Goes if you're still waiting on seeing the film. Anyways, the movie had some great action scenes, like when the film crew was killed. Although I'm not a big fan of the Marionette dolls killing one of them. They're a whole new group of characters who just exist for this scene. I would have rather had the toys kill this guy. The Mangle car attack scene was also incredible, and honestly one of the best scenes of the film. I thought the action elements were very enjoyable and paired well with the increased horror. The movie was also very fast-paced, and I still can't decide if that's a pro or a con. The first film had stuff going on between all the action and horror, while the second movie is just a non-stop rollercoaster ride after the first act. It kept me very entertained, but I also felt the hyper-pacing in some scenes. For example, after the Mangle car chase, Vanessa's car breaks down, and not even like 30 seconds later, Jeremiah pulls up and helps her get to Mike's house. I remember thinking, man, they sure resolved that hiccup incredibly fast. I think like 5 to 10 minutes of extra scenes would have helped the movie's pacing and flesh out the story a little more. That being said, the chaotic nature of the movie did keep me very entertained. So I wouldn't really say it was a failure, but could have been better. It definitely felt like the movie needed to stop to breathe. However, you could argue that the fast-paced chaos fits with the original game. Moving on from the general tone and pacing of the movie, let's discuss the characters, which I think are the most complex aspect of the film. I'll start with the main antagonist, the Marionette. Much like in the games, she's haunted by Charlotte Emily, the daughter of Freddy's co-owner, Henry Emily. We'll circle back around to him later. The film starts with an incredible cold open, taking us back to the original Freddy Fazbear's Pizza in 1982. Which is weird since in the games opened in 83. I assume this was done so the Freddys from the first film could open in 83, but it's still kinda weird. It's not like it affects the plot, it's just really random. Anyways, Charlie sees a kid being abducted by Afton in an awesome yellow rabbit costume, and she tries to get some parents' attention, but they ignore her in an admittedly cartoonish way. I think it is an interesting depiction of how parents will ignore kids' concerns since they're just children, but I wish it was written a little more realistically. Charlie decides to take things into her own hands. She manages to save the kid and runs from the terrifying into the pit looking rabbit. But she's stabbed multiple times by Afton and dies in the trapdoor above the Marionette. She falls through, and the animatronic rises onto the stage, cradling Charlie's body in its arms. This whole cold open was phenomenal. It's such a simple introduction of Charlie and a great disturbing sequence. It's also really cool to see Freddy's open with guests. Anyways, Charlie's spirit haunts the Marionette, with her soul being stuck in her last emotion of utter rage aimed at the parents who ignored her, and likely at her father for neglecting her. In the games, Charlie is frequently depicted as more of a somber character, and very protective of the other spirits. She's also the main force against Afton, even if she acts after his crimes have already been committed. Having her be a vengeful spirit, hating adults rather than Afton is an interesting decision, but one that I think works. The Marionette is a terrifying villain. She feels so unique in the movie, not only being a supernatural puppet, but also possessive spirit. Charlie possessing Lisa and Abby were definitely some of the most terrifying parts of the film. Their unnaturally long limbs and creepy painted faces made for some really spooky scenes. That being said, I wish we saw the actual Marionette body a bit more. I'm also kind of mixed on the Marionette going on a killing spree against adults and parents, but it's not too out of character. In the games, while she's generally a good-natured spirit, she's still an angry ghost. The Marionette is an antagonist throughout the game series, and the FNAF animatronics have a long history of hating adults. So it definitely is a shift from her character in the games, but it's not too much different. I also thought the Marionette's presence gave the film a much clearer plot and objective. That being said, there were a lot of side plots that felt either kind of pointless or resolved too quickly. The main example of this is the Vanessa Sub-Plot with her lingering trauma from her father's abuse. When I saw the trailers, I assumed this would be a recurring struggle throughout the film, and by the end, she would confront him and move on. However, this whole plot took up about 2 scenes before being swept under the rug to focus on the Marionette. I loved all of these scenes with Afton, and especially the baby cameo, but I wish it was a larger focus in the film. It would have given Vanessa a character arc, confronting her trauma from her father as she tries to stop Charlie, her best friend who she tried to save from him. Granted, it does kind of come back at the end, but it would have been much better sprinkled throughout the film. On the note of poorly integrated elements, let's discuss her brother, Michael Afton. Michael and Vanessa felt like two sides of the same coin. Vanessa was left traumatized and scarred by Afton's abuse, but on the other hand, it seems like it transformed Michael into a monster like his father. He seems to believe that just because he's William's son, he has to be like him. I read this as a commentary on the fear that we inherit the worst traits of our parents. Anyways, I have very mixed feelings on Michael. I like how he kicked off the plot instead of Charlie just being freed by dumb luck or stupid characters. And Fast Fest being revealed as a murder fest was a pretty neat twist that recontextualized the whole event. That being said, Michael kinda feels like he's just there. I don't think it would be too bad if he didn't just disappear after the start of the film. But the fact that he starts the plot, vanishes, and returns as the final big bad really makes him feel like a plot device. His presence and role as an antagonistic Afton are somewhat foreshadowed throughout the film. William mentions that Vanessa is his favorite child, implying she has a sibling, and you can see photos of him in the Afton house. Then later, after Mike disconnects the Marionette signal to the animatronics, it comes back, which is later revealed to be Michael's doing. So sure, he is foreshadowed during the film, but I wish he made more physical appearances, even if it was just him stalking Mike and Abby or creeping around Fast. Anything to remind us that he exists, since honestly, I'd forgotten about him by the time he returned as the big bad. Mike will probably have a bigger role in the next film since his father is coming back. And if we get a sister location adaptation, then I'm sure Michael will be a major character. For now though, I think he's a neat evil character played well by Freddy Carter, but sadly he's underutilized, and I'm hoping we see more of him in the future. While we're talking about poorly used characters, let's discuss Henry. Before I say anything, I want to give some serious props to Ski Ulrich for his fantastic performance in this movie. He was a small part of the film, but his performance was so impactful and upsetting. Seeing this man torn over his daughter's death and how he neglected her made for a very upsetting scene, and a great insight into Henry's shattered mental state. The set design also went a long way on that front. That being said, I wasn't the biggest fan of him in this movie. I think Henry is a key example of how this movie does a poor job introducing characters or lore. I don't even think his name was mentioned during his whole introduction. The only time I remember being said is when Mike tells Vanessa about the music box. The film doesn't even mention that he was William Afton's business partner until the post-credits scene, which is such a bizarre choice. Why even include one of the founders of Fazbear Entertainment if you're not going to treat him as the founder of Fazbear? I know this is a movie for the fans, so really most viewers already know this, but it wouldn't take too long to explain it sooner. I guess his purpose was to add more weight to Charlotte's death, and to help Mike defeat the Marionette, but I still feel like the story ignores a large chunk of his character. I definitely think his inclusion was very much a setup for a sequel, considering we hear a Pizzeria Simulator reference in the post-credits scene. So while currently, I think his inclusion is a little wonky, future films might make him worthwhile. Something that was used well in this movie was the toy animatronics. Like the bots in the first film, they all appeared throughout the movie and each had their own attack sequence. I do think Balloon Boy was a little left out. He wasn't mentioned by any of the characters and only appeared a handful of times before Mike decapitated him, which admittedly, as a longtime FNAF fan, was very satisfying. Don't tell me you haven't wanted to destroy that stupid robot child. Another good thing was the toys' voices. I discussed my skepticism over them speaking and their casting in our toy animatronic history video, and I'm glad to say that I thought their voice actors did a great job, especially Megan Fox as Toy Chica. I'm happy there weren't any weird Toy Chica jokes. You know the ones I'm talking about. I also think the toys being puppeted by the Marionette rather than being haunted was a great choice. It made her a much bigger overarching threat and avoided an even bigger cast of characters. I thought the toys got much more on-screen appearances than the animatronics in the first film did, and they got to interact with the world of the film a bit more. The Fast Fest scene with Toy Freddy was great. There were also a bunch of meta jokes about the toys, like Abby's teacher saying Toy Chica was a costume, and a kid saying Freddy looked like a toy, which admittedly, I found enjoyable. Overall, I thought the toys were a great group of antagonists, and I enjoyed the withered animatronics too. Considering they weren't marketed much, I wasn't expecting them to be very present in the film, and that was an accurate assumption. I understand Scott not wanting to include these characters too much, considering there's already the toys on the loose, and even though the Wizards had a very small role, they were still great. Like every other animatronic in the film, they look amazing, and their sequence where they attacked Mike was awesome. I love seeing Freddy and Chica reference their iconic poses. I also thought them being prototypes served as a good reason for why the mask fooled them, except Foxy for some reason. However, Withered Bonnie felt really left out of this movie, and I also thought it would have made more sense for them to be the same animatronics from the first film. Not only would we have gotten to see these iconic designs even more, but it would have helped slim down the movie's already big animatronic cast. Another animatronic that appeared in this film was Circus Baby. My girlfriend Blake was so excited when she showed up. She also pointed out that Baby has blue eyes, meaning she wasn't possessed. Unlike most of the cameos in the film, I believe this one is pretty significant. Baby is likely being prepped for a future FNAF movie. Maybe even some sort of role in Five Nights at Freddy's 3, similar to how she was a big part of the third FNAF novel. I don't want to derail this video with theories, but I really loved this cameo. It was a great treat for fans, and she looks amazing. On the note of minor characters, this movie had a lot of good cameos. RWQFSFASXC showed up for a split second, so briefly that my girlfriend actually missed him. And fanverse characters Candy and Pop Goes appeared on some of the Freddy's arcades. I am a big stupid fan of the FNAF fanverse, and the CPU in particular, so seeing the faces of that universe in this movie was phenomenal. Admittedly, I was so in awe seeing Pop Goes on the big screen that I totally missed Candy. I also think it's awesome how these arcades use footage from Candy's Fishing, which was a minigame in FNAF 3, and Pop Goes Arcade. I did find it weird how there was no Ignited Freddy cameo, considering he's also part of the fanverse, and this movie already had the Withered Animatronics, which are very similar to the Ignited crew. So in theory, building an Ignited Freddy or other Ignited characters wouldn't have taken too much more work, similar to how Shadow Freddy and Bub in the first movie just reused the classic animatronic molds. Even ignoring that missed opportunity, I'm such a big fan of Candy's and Pop Goes, and seeing them not only become official FNAF games, but also appear on the big screen is incredible. Some characters not from the games also had cameos, those being Kim and Doug from the first movie. There are also more YouTuber appearances. Corey X Kenshin reprised his role as the taxi driver, and Razbowski, Dawko, Baz, and my Go 8-Bit Ryan appeared during Faz Fest. Overall, I thought this movie had a solid set of Easter eggs and cameos, making it very rewarding for fans of the series. Oh yeah, Aunt Jane was also mentioned. Apparently she survived her Golden Freddy attack and started rambling about killer robots, which sparked interest in Freddy's again, giving Michael the idea to start Faz Fest. Unfortunately for her, she was institutionalized, so yeah, don't gotta see her again. Kinda confused on how Aunt Jane would even know about multiple killer robots when she was attacked by Golden Freddy alone. It feels a bit sloppy, and I'm not the biggest fan of how Aunt Jane is just written out of the movie, but I guess it's serviceable. The final part of this movie that I want to discuss is the third act. I actually wrote this section twice. Originally, I was much harsher on this ending, but after seeing the movie again in theaters, I couldn't help but absolutely love it, even if it has its issues. As I discussed earlier, the Marionette possessing Abby is a terrifying sequence. However, it lasts too short for my liking, as Mike quickly uses Henry's music box to free his sister from Vanessa's best friend. I love the toys stopping the main characters from escaping shortly after, but having Michael suddenly take over as the main villain is almost out of nowhere. However, I can't say I hate it, mostly because Freddy Carter absolutely steals the show, and is a pretty solid villain monologue. He also reminds the movie that Vanessa had a character arc at one point. She kinda wraps that up by calling Mike and Abby her family. Just when all seems hopeless for the main characters, Foxy's singing fills the air, kicking off an awesome sequence as the classic animatronics destroy the toys. Every FNAF fan who was a kid in 2015 wanted to see the original crew fight the toys, so this is some pretty solid fan service, and it was a great sequence to see in theaters with an audience. However, it is a pretty quick wrap-up of Michael's 2-second villain arc. An extra like 10 minutes of him commanding the toys would have been much better. But still, this scene was so awesome and funny, I couldn't help but love it. The crazy music, animatronic chaos, and Toy Chica screaming "Fuck!" as she's decapitated. This might just be peak cinema. Michael tries to flee as his army is destroyed, but he gets knocked down by Jeremiah, which I really enjoyed, even if it was really pointless since Michael just gets away after all. So yeah, a very quick third act that I can't help but absolutely love. Like I said earlier, a longer runtime would have definitely helped flesh out the story. However, the cliffhanger ending with the Marionette possessing Vanessa was fantastic, and has me really excited for what's next. It is a solid addition to what was mostly a hype moments and aura ending. Much like a lot of this movie, this ending does mostly set up for a sequel. Aside from Vanessa's fate, the original animatronics break down after their battle with the toys and their spirits move on. But now that the Golden Freddy kid is gone, Afton will apparently be able to leave Freddy's, which is something that just kind of comes out of nowhere. Anyways, this leads into a post-credit scene, which shows the Fazbear's Fright crew breaking into Freddy's and retrieving William Afton's spring-trapped remains. Yet another very solid cliffhanger. Even further, in the post-credit scene, we hear Henry warning Mike that the Marionette is coming after him. So while this movie's conclusion was very abrupt and could have been better, it was still a lot of fun, and the final moments of the film had me really excited for Five Nights at Freddy's 3. Overall, this is a flawed movie, and despite how much I complained about it, I absolutely loved it. The increased horror and action made the movie much more entertaining, and there were so many more scenes with animatronics, which was awesome to see. I also thought the overall plot was better and more focused, even with worse pacing. And the film was very rewarding as a fan. Seeing all these characters and Easter eggs on the big screen was awesome. This movie is very clearly pandering to fans, and as a fan, I absolutely loved it. But as I previously discussed, I hope the characters and lore are explained more in future films, so that the general audiences can clearly understand and appreciate them as much as the fans do. Along with that, better pacing and more scenes to flesh out the story would make for a much stronger movie. I will also add that, unlike the first film, this one focused a little too much on setting up a sequel. Again though, I love this film, and I thought it was better than the first. I acknowledge it isn't perfect, but it's such a rewarding movie as a fan of the series, and I just found it to be a lot of fun. And again, the Marionette was a standout character and a great overarching antagonist, unlike the first movie where I thought Afton was a bit wasted. Hopefully Five Nights at Freddy's 3 takes note of the second film's criticisms so it can be even better. If you enjoyed this video, please consider liking, subscribing, and joining our monthly membership. It helps support us, and you get a bunch of cool perks like shoutouts in our videos, custom emojis, badges next to your name, exclusive looks at upcoming projects, and more. Special thanks to our current member Shaun, and thanks to you for watching. Be sure to check out some of our other videos.